a very courageous man, a very patriotic man, a man who believes in truth and integrity. And he absolutely lives it. And he is my dear, dear friend, Brandon Darby. Brandon.
Hey, everybody. Good morning. Good afternoon now, I guess. How many of you were here last night? Awesome. How many of you weren't here last night? Okay, that's better. That's great. I'm happy that more people are hearing this. You know, I've been here before and I've talked with you all, and I've come and I've talked about human trafficking. I've talked about, we kind of have a process for trying to get information out. When we know there's a problem, we write about it, and then we start to do grassroots tours. We travel around and just try to make it personal to everyone, answer questions, and make sure everyone knows what's going on. About the last year and a half, actually a little longer, it's pushing 2 years, but about the last year and a half, Breitbart has enabled me to spend a great deal of my time on the border. And when I say on the border, I mean all the way from the Gulf of Mexico all the way to the Pacific Ocean. There's only one little stretch that I haven't seen, and that would be most of the Big Bend sector. But maybe some of you know this, some of you don't. There are 9 border patrol sectors along the southwest border with Mexico. You frequently hear that the border's wide open, and then how many of you felt relieved when Perry and Abbott and everyone got on TV and said that they were sending 1,000 National Guard members to the border? Did anybody here feel relieved? No. Did anybody here think that that was actually what was occurring? They are sending 1,000 National Guard members to the border. But as you're going to see in this little film that we're going to show you, that's not really sufficient, and they're not actually doing what they said they're doing. They are doing what they said they're doing technically, but it's a technical issue, and you'll understand that a little more after this video and after I talk to you. So we put together a tour. We brought some grassroots leaders from the state together. We all met in San Antonio, and then got a van and drove to the border. And I wanted to show people what exactly was happening on the border. The Rio Grande Valley sector, how many of you have ever heard of the Rio Grande Valley sector? You've heard of that? How many of you have not heard that before? Anyone? No one's gonna raise a hand. I know a couple of people did. So basically the way, I wish I had like a map and a laser and stuff to point out, but basically the way it's set up is the Rio Grande Valley sector is a quarter of Texas border with Mexico. It's just a quarter of the Texas border, right? It's one sector. That's where the majority of the unaccompanied minors are coming through, but it isn't where the majority of narcotics, cartel members, sex offenders, previously convicted sex offenders and murderers are coming through. And it isn't even necessarily where the majority of illegal aliens who are coming here to work are coming through. Because there is a difference, you know, there are illegal aliens who come here to work. We all probably have met them or seen them or many people use them in their yards. Or for other work if you have a construction company. And obviously not everyone who comes across is coming across to commit sex offenses, but the fact of the matter is a lot of people do come across to do that. For instance, we broke on Breitbart News, I was proud to say, that in the last 3 years, there have been over 7,000, listen to this, over 7,000 previously convicted sex offenders who have been deported from the state of Texas alone, just from the state of Texas. Did y'all know that? 7,000, over 7,000. It's actually closer to probably 8,000 now. And that mostly happened in Eagle Pass, which is in the Del Rio sector, which is 2 sectors over. They've seen a 100% increase in the last few months in previously convicted sex offenders coming across the border. And a lot of that is attributed to the way that the Obama administration. How many of you have heard this? How many of you have heard that Obama has deported more people than anyone else? You heard that? Okay, let me tell you a little secret. That's not true. And I'll give you the details of it. Let me tell you the details. The details are this. When people come across the border, they're asked if they'll go back, basically. Voluntary, Voluntary removals. And they're asked if they'll go back. That is not, like during the Bush administration, that is not considered a deportation, okay? Now, Under the Obama administration, everyone who voluntarily goes back is called a deportation. And so not only are they called a deportation, but there's no punishment if you come across and they catch you and they let you voluntarily go back. Well, when you come across the next day and they catch you again and they let you voluntarily go back, there's no punishment for that, right? So where it used to be that illegal aliens would receive a penalty for illegal re-entry after deportation, that doesn't really happen much anymore. So when you see these high numbers, a lot of them are the same people, and it's stuff that generally is not considered a deportation. We're following each other, right? Okay, so we're going to talk about a little bit about the Rio Grande Valley sector, and then we're going to talk about the Laredo sector, which is one sector over. I told you that there's 9 sectors along the U.S.-Mexico border, right? Now there are 5 of those sectors in Texas. You have the Rio Grande Valley sector, then you have the Laredo sector, then the Del Rio sector, then it goes on to the Big Bend sector, then it goes on to the El Paso sector, 5. So, when Perry and everyone got on TV and said that they are securing the border because the federal government can't or won't, and they're sending 1,000 troop members to the border, they're sending 1,000 members to the Rio Grande Valley sector, okay? That's not the sector right over. So we decided what we would do is get this grassroots group together and we're gonna deal with the Laredo sector. And once we get the Laredo sector in everyone's mind and they understand that it's wide open, then we're gonna go on to the Del Rio sector. You see what I'm talking about? We're just gonna go down the border and keep raising awareness. So we got the groups together and we put together a short little video. It's not superbly edited, it's just a short little video of that trip and what we learned. And at this point, we're gonna watch that. Joanne?
I think they've got a computer problem, so are you asking me to come up there and make a statement, or are you ready for the video?
I'm ready for the video.
Okay, are y'all ready for the video? It's gonna be a minute.
It's gonna be a computer crash, so.
No, I can keep talking, don't worry.
Yeah. If you guys will just wave back there, Brandon will pick up on that wave.
Yeah. So we're gonna wait for the video because of computer problems. It's been a troubled video. We had problems with the video when we spoke in Dallas too. Okay, so we're gonna skip the video for now. We'll flag me when it's ready. Here's what we did, and this is one of the things that makes, I think, our reporting, I'm very proud of our reporting at Breitbart Texas on the border, and here's why. We've spent so much time down there, and I've spent so much time down there, primarily alone, that these Border Patrol agents run into me in the middle of nowhere. You know, they're not used to running into anyone who's a U.S. citizen way out where they run into me. And they run into me and they're like, what are you doing out here? And I'm like, well, I'm trying to figure out what's going on out here, and then I'm gonna go tell the world what's happening here. And so they start talking to me and I give them my card. Well, so when that agent has a story he wants to tell, do you think he calls CNN, who trashes him constantly? No, they're gonna remember me, right? Because it was a person-to-person relationship, you know? I can write on Breitbart Texas all day long what's going on in the Laredo sector and on the border, but if I come here in front of you and talk to you and let you ask me questions and I interact with you, it's gonna matter more to you because you understand it more, right? See how that works? So that's what we've done. And we've just systematically gone literally from the Gulf of Mexico all the way to California, and all the way through California and then to Arizona, and then back to Arizona and back to California, and just systematically have gone across the border talking to Border Patrol agents. How many of you realize that they are not allowed to talk to media? You know that?
Yes.
How many of you don't realize that federal agents can't just tell media what's going on? They can. You know, I know more of you want to raise your hands. That's okay. I know it's embarrassing to be the only ones raising your hand. Do I take that the video is ready? Is that what that means? It sounded like.
No, it
sounded like Windows or something. Alert mess. So here's the deal. On the border, we have systematically gone back and forth, talked to every agent who would talk to us off the record. We found out that there's a Border Patrol union, and unions sound so bad, I know we're like, we don't like unions. But here's the deal. If it weren't for the Border Patrol Agents Union, and by the way, most of them are conservatives, you can imagine why they might not like the president right now, as people. Their union, if it weren't for the union, they would not have any mechanism to tell the country what's going on. So what we're seeing now is that the union began to tell us what was going on and what the agents were going through, and then we began to see the administration come in and crash down upon the union. And so, again, the Obama administration, who's pro-union, is very anti-Border Patrol union, even though the union is an AFL-CIO union. Isn't that strange, how that works? So they began to crash down upon them for telling us information that we then told the public, and we rely on a number of anonymous, not anonymous, but what would we call it, unnamed sources. We keep leaking documents that are internal intelligence reports. We leaked a document that showed that more than 75 nations had members coming across, had people, citizens coming across the southwest US border. 75 nations. The 3 nations most affected by Ebola, we leaked that because of someone in the Border Patrol that leaked us information. We had the official intelligence reports. We also leaked that out of all of these kids that are coming across, these little babies, well, it turns out 47% of them are not little babies at all. 47% of them are males who claim to be between the ages of 15 and 17. And when I say claim to be, that's because they may be 18, they may be 19 or 20 and look young. We don't really know. We have no way to verify it. However, they will be in public school with your kids this year in Texas. And if you think that 17 in Mexico and Honduras and El Salvador is the same thing as 17 here, you're wrong. It isn't, not at all. And they're gonna be in school with your kids or your grandkids. Some of you may be great-grandkids, I'm not trying to presume anything. And that's what we're gonna go through. So anyways, we systematically go down the border and we find all of the holes. Like we were in the Laredo sector, in the city of Laredo, right? And I'm out there and this Border Patrol agent said, if you want to see something, you ought to go look at these drainage tunnels. And I'm like, what's up with the drainage tunnels? And they said, well, these drainage tunnels that go down to the river, we're not allowed to go in there, and the illegal aliens and the drug smugglers know it. And I'm like, so what do you mean? They said, well, go look at them. There's ladders, there's everything, there's clothes, there's stuff in there for them. And so when we see a smuggler with narcotics or a group of illegal aliens, we chase them, they run into the drainage tunnel, and we're not allowed to go in there after them. They have to call the fire department, and then the fire department never shows up. And it's like, okay, so there's basically just like an amnesty highway from the river up into the city. They're like, that's right, now go look at the other end of that tunnel. So I, being myself, went into the tunnel, right? And I was going through the tunnel with my camera and my little night vision camera until I saw bats in the tunnel. And I was like, I'm sorry, people, I can't do it. But anyways, I was able to determine that the tunnel starts at the river and that there's entry points to the tunnel all along the way, and then the tunnel ends up in a neighborhood that's known for narcotic smuggling. Isn't that something? And so we were able to bring that little secret to the American public and say, look at these drug tunnels, look what's going on here. And that's what we systematically do. When we went to Arizona, we found that in the mountainous regions, there are these groups of people who sit up on the mountaintops, not exactly on the tops, but close to the top, and they hide, and they're actually scouts for the cartels. They're scouts. Some of these happen 20 miles into the US territory, into the United States of America. One rancher, a guy named Bevan Oliphant, he has several mountains. I don't own a mountain. How many of you can imagine owning a mountain? I don't. But he has several mountains on his ranch that he owns, his own mountains. And on top of one of the mountains, they found an antenna that was concreted in. And it was a relay station for the cartels, because they sit up there and they scout and they say, okay, the law enforcement's over there, there's people over this way, bring your shipment to the left. Bring your shipment up this way, bring your shipment up that way. So when the Border Patrol finally got to the top of the mountain to bust these people, one of them was a US citizen and the other was an illegal alien. And they were up there, and it turns out what happens is that the Mexican cartels send smugglers with batteries on their back, big battery packs. And every day there's smugglers who go to these relay stations. Did y'all know this? You ever heard of this before? Isn't that infuriating and insane? So when you go out in the mountains in Arizona and you set your radio to scan, you can hear the people, the scouts talking about you, whether you're a threat or not, to avoid you. You can hear them. That's how frustrating it is. 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, I went out to where Brian Terry was killed. It literally took me 6 hours to get to where he was killed. It wasn't easy to get there. It was a remote area. which was actually only like 3 miles from a neighborhood. But it's because of the mountains. It's really, yeah, it's pretty hot out there, about 110, and going up, how many of you have ever hiked like vertically? Not easy. When you're in Arizona and you worry about snakes, and it's that season where they don't rattle, and you know, pretty creepy. But there's also these people out there, and it was the people who killed Brian Terry, actually. That group was composed of illegal aliens, and it was composed of some US citizens. And they were what's called a RIP crew. How many of you have ever heard of a RIP crew? Check this out. There are people who go out to these regions for the purpose of robbing drug shipments. That's some bad boys right there, right? Like, it's bad to rob a 7-Eleven, but you gotta be real bad to go rob a drug smuggler for a cartel. And that happens on US soil. So when Brian Terry was killed, Border Patrol Agent Brian Terry, they were trying to interdict this group, this RIP crew, who was out there just to bust a drug or to steal a drug shipment. They were armed men with AK-47s on US soil, some of them illegal aliens, walking through our land, and they killed our law enforcement officer, you know? And there's a memorial out there for him. And so you find these little holes and you find these little things. Robert Rosas Jr., have you ever heard that name before? Tell you, Robert Rosas Jr. was a Border Patrol agent in California. And I have to tell the story, and then I'll tell it in the dark, whatever. Robert Rosas Jr. was a Border Patrol agent in California. A sensor was set off along the border, and he was sent out alone to check on the sensor. So when he got out there alone to check on that sensor, it turns out it was a trap. 5 illegal aliens had lured him. They attacked him. He shot one of them 2 times, but they still attacked him. They ended up killing him. Between their bare hands and his gun, they killed him dead right there on a ridge, about maybe 40 yards, 50 yards from the border fence, which is it's a fence that looks like the fence around a junkyard, just a sheet metal fence. There's no security there. And they killed him, and they took his night vision equipment. And when I went out there to honor him and to see where he was killed, I stood on the ridge where he was killed, and I was looking through a viewfinder of my camera, right? And I'm out there looking, and I get to this huge cross. It's like 15 feet, 12 feet high, and it has a big plaque on it with his name up high. And I'm looking through my viewfinder, and when I looked down, there was this sheet of laminated paper, and it was like going in the wind, bent over. It was really windy out there, and I couldn't see it, so I'm looking through my viewfinder, and I take one of my hands, and I moved it over, and it said, I think it said, either we love you, Papa, or we miss you, Papa. And it was a picture of him and his little kid. So you can see where the fire comes from to tell these guys stories on the Border Patrol agents, to tell their stories and to tell what they go through. With that, is that video ready now? Awesome. We're gonna watch the video, and then we're gonna talk a little bit longer and do a Q&A. Thank you. This would make a good, a good commercial for, DSL or something. So why don't we do this? Why don't we push pause and let it build up for a while in the system, and we'll keep talking. How's that sound? Okay, awesome. All right, guys. So we're gonna have a hard time with this video today. We might get to the video, we might not. But either way, I'll tell you what's going on in the video. I'll wait a few more minutes to do that, so I don't want to ruin the video for you. What's that? It's fine with me. I don't mind. It's kind of interesting this way. It's like if we had like a campfire. It's like there are these illegal aliens, and they come across the border with guns and narcotics, like we're a campfire ghost story or something. It's kind of fitting for what I'm talking about. Okay, I think we're gonna have to That's not gonna work too well, buddy. That video is not gonna happen. I'm pretty sure it isn't. All right, so here's the deal. Every step of the way, while we report on the border, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I started to realize some really frightening trends. I signed up for all of the, I went to the FBI website and I signed up for all of the press releases about crimes that are being prosecuted by the federal government, right? From the U.S. Attorney's Office. And when you sign up, they ask you if you want to sign up for DEA letters and for everything letters. So I signed up for the whole shebango, every email press release put out by under the DOJ or under Homeland Security. And I began to notice a really frightening trend. I began to realize a couple of things. I began to see this weird thing, and this is gonna sound weird when I start talking about it, but listen to me. I began to realize that every time there was a large-scale methamphetamine bust in the US, it was almost always a situation where there was a guy with a Hispanic last name who was getting 40 years. And then there was a guy or a couple of people with Anglo-sounding last names, English-sounding last names, who were getting 2 and 3 years. And so the former leftist in me was like, is this a racial disparity issue? And so I began to look into it, and what I found out was it was always, the reason the one guy was getting the higher sentence was because he was the leader of the organization, right? And I began to wonder, like, why on earth is every big methamphetamine bust in the United States right now led by some guy with a Hispanic last name, and then why do they have so many people with Anglo white-sounding last names like working for them? This is so weird. So I dug further and I began to find that every time one of those large-scale busts happen, and the guy with the Hispanic last name gets 40 years, he's actually an illegal alien. And I began to dig deeper, and I began to find that he's actually an illegal alien who's working for the cartels. So what we have is a situation where cartels are sending their own people into the US illegally across our border. They come and then they hire US citizens to work for their organization, for their cartels. And that's, people are like, well, that's scary. Let me tell you some details. So in Washington State, they've had several large-scale methamphetamine busts. And again, the US Attorney's Office finally went on record and said, yes, these are cartel operations that we are busting in our state. That's in the northwestmost corner of the US. That's all the way up there. And then I began to realize that the Bakken region, how many of you have ever heard of the Bakken region? It's South Dakota. We have a couple people. They're doing really well right now with oil from the fracking, right? From the shale oil. They're doing really well. And there's a big boom up there. Well, I began to realize that there were all these busts that were happening in and around the Bakken region. And I started digging, and guess what? It was always people who were illegal Mexican nationals running these operations in the Bakken region. There started to be a large increase in sex trafficking, human trafficking. There started to be a large increase in methamphetamines because the oil workers, apparently some oil workers can be kind of rough sometimes, right? Some oil field guys. Some of you are laughing because you know what I'm talking about. Some of them can be kind of rough, and I guess there's an industry or a market for prostitution and narcotics amongst some of those workers. Not all of them, of course. So then I began to look at Texas. How many of you are aware that we're having an oil boom right now? Yeah. So what does that mean? That means that we have cartels doing what? Providing women and narcotics in our oil boom, right? So I began to realize we have some frightening things occurring. Well, then something weird happened as I started noticing that in the southern states, like Alabama and Mississippi, every time there's a large bust there, it's some guy who's a Guatemalan national. Isn't that weird? Isn't that strange that in the western US it's all like Mexican nationals, and in the southern states it's all Guatemalan nationals? You know what that means? That means that the drug organizations, the transnational criminal gangs from Central and South America have already carved up the US into their own territories. That's what it means. It's frightening, right? How many of you are aware that 2 months ago, 2 teenagers were duct taped to chairs and beaten, and one of them had their finger nearly severed off while tortured. How many of you heard about, you know about that? Anybody else know about that? Well, guess what? The DOJ press release didn't say it. It just said that 2 teenagers were tortured and a bunch of guys got in trouble. But when you dug into the court records, guess what it was? Check this out. It was a Sinaloa cartel methamphetamine house that was robbed. Someone robbed it in St. Paul, Minnesota, all the way almost to the northern border with Canada. And the 2 teenagers, the 2 US citizens, they were paying to watch the house. The Sinaloa cartel hired MS-13 gang members from Los Angeles to fly up to Minnesota and torture these kids to get the information from them. So they tortured these teenagers until the teenagers told them where their dope was or who did it or whatever. That's frightening as heck to me. How many of you are aware that in 2010, how many of you ever heard of the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas, the Aryan Brotherhood, a white nationalist prison gang? How many of you are aware that in 2010, an Aryan Brotherhood member was arrested with 300 pounds of methamphetamine in Texas? 300 pounds, and he admitted that it was Gulf cartel meth. So now we have a situation where you have the Mexican cartels hiring US prison gangs to be their enforcers and their drug runners. How many of you think that's frightening? Okay, so if we ever get this video going,
It looks like it ought to go.
it ought to go now. We're going to watch the video and then we're going to talk a little bit about the holes in the border. And in light of what I just said, I think it might concern you a little bit. You might see where it affects your life. Can we do the video now?
I'm just a boy, fair and stranger, traveling through a world. Ain't no sickness, toil, or danger in that bright land to which I go. I'm going there to see my father. Said he'd meet me when I come. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over home.
And we're just leaving San Antonio, headed for Laredo with a group of some of the top Texas grassroots leaders, Tea Party leaders here in the state of Texas. Breitbart, Texas Managing Director Brandon Darby organized this trip to bring these people down to the border and let them see for themselves, eyewitness what's really happening down here on the border. It's one thing to read about it and to watch the videos and see the news reports, but to come down and actually experience this gives you a totally different perspective. As we've found coming down here to the border, Brandon's been coming down here for a year and a half now, and I've been coming down here for several months. And it's a totally different perspective when you see this for yourself. So that's what we wanted to do, is bring these grassroots leaders, these Tea Party leaders down here and let them see exactly what's really happening, not what the mainstream media is showing them, so they can go back to their organizations and help spread the word as to the truth as to what's really happening down here on the Texas border and Texas-Mexico border in South Texas. And I think it's going to be a very effective trip for them to be able to communicate and help spread the word on the reality of what's on the ground down here.
That's me.
Take a look at this street. This is really important. See the street?
Yeah.
Do you see there's streets everywhere, there's steps everywhere, and do you see the way that everyone here appears? All someone has to do, and most of them who do it, make it across and actually successfully do so. All they have to do is get across this river that we're about to go see, and if they run and they make a mad dash to get into the center of town, no one can tell who they are. People in the town will hide them. That's what Border Patrol said to me. So it's really not that far of a stretch to get in. And that's just right here, and they'll do it right in the center, middle of the day, they'll do it. If they can get across the river without being detected, they hide in the grass, and then they make a mad dash for it, and they make it. And that is Nuevo Laredo on the other side of that river right there behind you. That is the headquarters for the Los Zetas cartel. Okay, now you see the river? See how shallow it is? Check it out. This is the only border fence between Texas and the Zetas headquarters, right here. This is it.
Okay, I need that picture.
That's all that's here. Usually there's lookouts all along the river, so usually there are fishermen that are lookouts. You're going to see that on the U.S. side too tonight. You're going to see fishermen who are just out there in the middle of nowhere alone and somehow feel safe just if they're fishing in the middle of nowhere in cartel land. And then right over here in these bushes, right before that big berm that comes out to the lighter color shade, and you see the dirt? You have the big...
It's smooth. It's almost like
Yeah, someone's in that one and then
Right. There's always a scout over there. And I've watched them before when I've been sitting out here in the lead. I've watched them, and a guy just like wearing like tennis shoes, shorts, and a t-shirt will just walk out and the other guy walks in. Like, really, really. And then they throw shit in there. And they're watching U.S. law enforcement. The best time is... If you go down the river just past that bend, it's going to loop to the left a little bit, and then it loops a hard 90 degrees up to the right. That's what the river does. And so all of the area between us, or really between those tracks and that river bend, is called West Laredo. And then that's also, you'll see tonight. So the last time we were down here, they had one Border Patrol agent stationed for all of West Laredo, even though West Laredo is an area where the narcotics come in. We're in a location called One River Place, just outside, 8 miles outside of Laredo, Texas, immediately across the river from Nuevo Laredo, which is pretty much the headquarters for the Los Zetas cartel. This area was going to be a neighborhood, and obviously it didn't get developed. But what you're going to find is there's very little security. Through sources, we were able to determine that there are very few sensors in this region. As we walk close to the river, which is not very far this way, you're going to see every maybe half mile there's going to be a fisherman, right? And he's going to be out there fishing, and he fishes there every day, almost for a living, because it actually is for a living. They're scouts for the cartels. Maybe not all of them, but probably they are. And that's what we're doing out here. As we walk, you're going to find bits of clothing from illegal immigrants. As we walk, you're going to find inner tubes, deflated inner tubes that smugglers have used, and you're going to see that there's absolutely nothing between us right here and between the highway that's right there and between the Zetas territory. And we're in the Laredo sector, one sector away from the Rio Grande Valley sector, where Texas leaders and national leaders are focusing all of their law enforcement efforts.
Again, my name is Hector Garza. I'm a Border Patrol agent coming up on almost 14 years of working in the Laredo sector area. I'm also the spokesperson for the National Border Patrol Council, Local 2455. We represent about 1,700 members, Border Patrol agents, and support staff in the Laredo area. Unfortunately, what we see a lot is that a lot of these agents are being assigned to like administrative type of duties. We've seen a decline in apprehensions in the southwest border, including the Rio Grande Valley and the Laredo area. A lot of people think that it's because of the Beast, which is the train that brings all these people from Central America to the U.S.-Mexico border. It derailed in Mexico, and it's been out of service for like 2 weeks already. I mean, it's only been about 3 weeks that the numbers have started kind of declining. Obviously, the numbers are down with family units and children, but obviously the drugs are still coming and the dangerous criminals. Whenever there's been like escapes in prisons in Central America, and they put like a big announcement to the agents, what happens is that we end up catching them here on the U.S. border. Now, what happens to the ones we don't catch? They'll either come straight up through here, another one will come down through that area, and another one will come to that area at the same time. And actually, the smuggling activity will occur. And it's very easy to actually smuggle people. Every part of the Mexican side, of the river on this Mexican side, somebody is assigned to that area. So we know that there are scouts that are always looking out for us. We have scouts on the Mexican side, and we have scouts on the American side as well. And if you don't have the sufficient manpower, you can see how it's very easy to actually have people get away. We do have a Border Patrol agent here, but when we have this Border Patrol agent here, there's going to be a group of 20, 30 crossing just down river. And this is a very busy area, and you can kind of see how the town lends itself for this type of community. There's a lot of abandoned houses that they use as stash houses, and the law enforcement presence out here is very small. Now, what we know is that these criminal organizations will exploit the communities, and be it that they're volunteering to actually engage in these criminal activities, or be it that they're coerced by the drug cartels. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these people are actually coerced and intimidated by these activities. I mean, if you live in this town and there's really little to no law enforcement presence, you pretty much are going to become a target of these criminal organizations. Morale is low, especially when you are risking your life out there, when you're exposing yourself to the elements, and you apprehend groups of people, and then the government turns around and releases them into our country. So yes, morale is low. However, our agents still continue to come to work, and they still try their best, and we are very good at what we do. The way to shut down the border is having boots on the ground. As you can see, you can have an agent here with a very nice truck and a camera system, but if you don't have the boots on the ground to be able to respond, how do you stop it?
Immediately behind us is Nuevo Laredo, which is the headquarters for the Los Zetas cartel. And now this area here is between the river, which is the boundary between the U.S. and Mexico, and a neighborhood called the Azteca neighborhood. The Azteca neighborhood is a very low-income neighborhood, and it's known for smuggling. It's a major narcotics hub for this part of Texas. And so people come up, you can see from the footprints, people come up the river, it's very shallow here, and they're able to come up and wait, and then scouts tell them when the border patrol is gone, and then the people make a run for it to the neighborhood, and once they're in the neighborhood, they're kept in a series of stash houses, and law enforcement doesn't know what to do. Now, we've spoken with Border Patrol agents out here, in addition to speaking to the Border Patrol Agents Union, and they told us all about it. So basically, this is an area that's controlled by the city, like a city park, right? It's called Fisherman's Landing. And as you go down that way, go west, the park is just getting more and more overgrown. And there's a series of drainage tunnels. And in the drainage tunnels, people go and they use that for narco trafficking and for smuggling. Law enforcement isn't allowed to catch them and go in there. So if law enforcement sees someone, if the Border Patrol sees someone shipping drugs or people, and the Border Patrol approaches them, but people simply go into drainage tunnels, and Border Patrol isn't allowed to go in there. Only the fire department can go in there. That's the way the rules are set up. So basically, the entire area in Laredo, most of the area, is just one big place for criminals to come in or for illegal aliens to come in and to get away with it. We're just one section over from the Rio Grande Valley sector. So the way it works is you have the Gulf of Mexico, then the Rio Grande Valley sector, which is in the news a lot right now, and then right over from that you have the Laredo sector. But interestingly, none of the National Guard are being sent here. There's no state troopers being sent here. So it's really just the Border Patrol agents out here in insufficient numbers trying to deal with this. But the place, as you can see, is wide open.
The Anzalduas Bridge used to be, this was a big area for narcotics. Now it's kind of expanded to the people. It's slowed down a little bit. Even though we don't see anybody, we still have somebody monitoring us. What do we need? Better equipment. I drive a boat at night, and we have the headgear, which you wear, sometimes helmet, sometimes a headgear, which is elastic, and mine's rotted out. So instead of driving like this, I have to drive like this, which means one hand on the NVG. Because we can drive with NVGs and radar. But it makes it easier if we have the headgear, if we have those helmets. I love DPS, I love the state of Texas. Their gear is better than ours. Their rifles are better, their armor is better, their headgear is better, their boats are better. I don't know that we need 6 machine guns. One would be nice, but we'll probably never get it. Yeah, their equipment is better than ours. We have lookouts everywhere. If you look at Anzalduas Park on the weekends, if you happen to go out, or if you were around tomorrow, you'll see families who look like they're fishing, but they're on the cell phone 90% of the time. So they're calling out, hey, the boats have moved. All you have to do is move 100 yards in either direction, and you can't be seen, and there you go. The thing is, you look for the jet skis doing a stupid move, and look downriver, because they're distracting you. So yeah, we have problems. A lot of times they have more intel sources than we do. They'll take a load out, and they may have up to 15 or 20 scouts laid all out reporting on every single thing we do. The big stuff is this. Mexicans cross over, we process them, we can send them back if they're not going to jail. If it's an OTM is other than Mexican. I can see somebody cross the river right now, I pick them up, I process them, Mexico won't take them back because they're not Mexican citizens. Even though I could take a video of them crossing from Mexico to here, show it to them, and they still wouldn't take them back. If they're coming here, if you move 50 yards upriver, and by the time you get there, they're already here. The smugglers have made a cash windfall, right? Why? It's like the Cubans. All they have to do is touch the land, and as soon as they touch the land, welcome to America. At that point, we're responsible for safety, security, and all this. And the Border Patrol has done the best job out of all this because we catch the people. You know, our resources, we've been hampered. We have so many people babysitting or watching. When our cells were packed, we'd have, our station can hold like 300 people. We've actually held up to 1,300 almost. OTMs are probably, it depends. If they're adult OTMs without children, they're probably going to be sent back unless they can really show that they have what's called a credible fear, which an asylum officer determines. If they're families, meaning an adult, usually a female and multiple children, they're probably going to get to stay. They dumped a bunch of them off at the bus station today.
What do you guys think? So, I have a question for you. So when our leaders come out and say, we're sending 1,000 troops to the border to secure the border, and they're only talking about one sector, and the next sector over looks like that, does that offend you at all? Does it make you feel like you're not being told the whole truth? So when you say we're sending 1,000 people to the border to secure the border, it's like, well, you're telling the truth, but you're also being a little bit disingenuous, in my opinion, to put it nicely, which I'm going to do because I'm in a church right now. I will put it nicely. So here's the deal. Let's talk about National Guard on the border right now. Let's have a little talk, and then I'm going to stop talking pretty quickly and open it up for Q&A, which I will then talk longer when you ask me questions, because that's what I do. But it will be informative. But let's talk about the National Guard. So on the border, as it stands, there's a lot of areas where they have cameras and sensors, and they can tell when people are coming across. But the Border Patrol says that roughly 1 out of 10 times, sometimes in some areas like the Rio Grande Valley sector, it's 50% of the time, they're able to respond when they know that people are coming across. They don't have enough agents. So if you have a bunch of cameras, you know, imagine this, if we have a bunch of cameras along the border and a bunch of sensors, right? And we can tell when people are coming across, and you say, hey guys, someone's coming across right here. And the Border Patrol agents say, we're too busy over here, sorry. What good does that do? That doesn't do much good, does it? Okay, so now if the National Guard's going to be on the border, and all they can do is report to the Border Patrol that they see illegal aliens coming across, I'm going to ask you, what you've just done is you've basically put 1,000 human sensors on the border for a Border Patrol to respond to who doesn't have the resources or the manpower to respond. So if they already can only respond 1 out of 10 times to when they know an illegal alien's crossing, what good does it do to put 1,000 people out there with binoculars to tell them illegal aliens are crossing? It doesn't do any good at all, does it? What does it do?
Sounds good.
It sounds good. It sounds good. That's right. So with that, I'm going to open up for Q&A, and then you're going to let me know what kind of things are on your mind, and then I'm going to ramble on for 10 minutes each time you ask a question. And it'll be very informative, but I can't help myself.